stand up and give your welcome and love to Reverend Dr. William Barber.
Hello, 1199. I'm so glad to be here on tonight from North Carolina, from down south. My friend and brother and a leader in so many ways for so many people, President Gresham. Let's give him a hand. Come on, let's give him a hand. I know this history, George. Local 1199 Hospital Workers Union in New York has always had a deep commitment to labor and civil rights alliance building, Jerry. Dr. Martin Luther King said this was his favorite union. It has, since its founding in the 1930s, a strong anti-racism leadership and a strong commitment to promoting rank and file leaders to the union leadership. This union, like Jesus, has focused on the least of these in the hospital hierarchy of labor. I believe in a trickle-up theory, that if you raise the salaries of the lowest paid workers, if you lift from the bottom, then everybody benefits. If you lift housekeepers and bedpan emptiers and nursing assistants and CNAs, as a pastor, I see your work. I know your work. I've walked in the valley of the shadow of death. Many times you have been the very people, the last ones with the members that I've had to minister to. You've kept the human family clean, kept them fed, kept them in bed and bedrooms that were polished clean every day. There is no more important work than what you do. I'm married to a registered nurse who has worked nights at a big hospital for most of our marriage, so I could not do what I do. We could not raise our children. We could not fight in the movement like we do, and like I do, unless she was there, unless she was supported by so many like you. Some of you might wonder, well, why would President Gresham invite this big curly-haired preacher to the house of SEIU, the largest local in the world? Well, I wondered that too a little. I'm humbled to be here, and I'm deeply thankful for the historic work that labor has done down through the years. Because at many points in history, labor and civil rights have been two movements headed in the same direction. Many people don't know it, but in 1868, immediately following the Civil War, when black people wanted not just freedom but full citizenship, down in the South, before the days of Jim Crow, they created something called fusion politics, and blacks and progressive whites came together and they passed some of the most forward-thinking civil rights laws, voting laws, education laws, and labor laws. In fact, when black people and progressive whites got together and rewrote the Constitution after the Civil War, they actually put a phrase in there, not only equal protection under law, but they said every person has the right to enjoy the fruits of their own labor. Civil rights and labor, two movements headed in the same direction. Labor was there when the civil rights movement began a fresh birthing with the genesis of the NAACP to stand against injustice, and civil rights and the labor movement were combined together to create the energy and the impetus for the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Dr. King in 1961 made it clear, and we need to hear him again. He said, the only coalition that can transform America the way America must be transformed is for blacks, poor whites, labor, faith, and the civil rights community to join hand in hand. So I'm here today standing firmly in that same understanding of fusion politics. Say fusion. And I want you to know that your president has been hanging out down south a little bit. He slipped away from these concrete streets and came down to the dirt roads a little bit. 6 years ago, we began a movement in North Carolina, 21st century fusion politics, led by the NAACP. We called it the Historic Thousands on Jones Street People's Assembly. It was 60 organizations when we started. It's 140 now of civil rights, progressive, social justice advocates, labor, and faith. I want to give you a report from your kinfolk down south, because some believe that the South is too solid. In fact, the truth is the staunchest anti-labor supporters in our United States Congress and Senate, or even in our state general assemblies, either come from the South or they run to the South. In fact, there's a man running for president from the North, I believe Massachusetts. I believe his name is Romney. At least it was yesterday. You never know, he might switch. But he's running from the North, but he's running to the South. Ultra-conservatives always run to the South, betting that the old line Southern conservatism, what Richard Nixon called the white Southern strategy, they bet that they can get people to vote against their own self-interest. They bet that they can get them to vote for tax cuts to the wealthy while most of them in the South are poor. They bet that they can get them to vote against labor rights when if we need anything in the South, it's fair labor rights and living wages. The ultra-conservative, they bet that they can get people to vote against government spending in the face of crumbling schools and extraordinary poverty that cannot be turned around or addressed without significant and targeted government investment. They run south. They may come from the north, but they run south. And they use a racialized narrative in an attempt to get white Southerners to vote against their own self-interest. They bet on Tea Party intimidation today in the South. They bet on the ultra-conservative, heretical Christian evangelism in the South that talks about God who wants freedom but says little about a God who wants justice. But I stopped by to tell you and let you to know today that the South is not solid. There are new dynamics at work, new demographics at work, new discussions going on. Your president came down in February and joined more than 15,000 of us, black, brown, and white, civil rights and labor, in this new coalition. I know that some of you heard that President Obama won North Carolina in 2008, a state that had not voted for a Democrat for president since 1976. But let me tell you what really happened. Utilizing the new fusion politics, civil rights, say civil rights, labor, and faith, black, brown, and white. We used that, and in 2006, we won something called same-day registration, early voting, and Sunday voting, the most progressive new voting laws throughout the South. This victory in 2006 opened up a possibility for a brand new electorate, a more diverse electorate. President Obama lost on election day in 2008, but because the civil rights and labor communities won the victory of same-day registration early voting with progressive legislators, more than 1 million black and brown and labor citizens went to the polls early. North Carolina had the largest increase in voter turnout of any state in the nation from 2004 to 2008. That's how we won. In 2009, the Koch brothers sent their money south to try to resegregate the largest school system in our state, Wake County, Raleigh, our capital. They wanted to make it a model of rolling back public schools and shoring up private schools. They ran south, but they ran into our coalition, civil rights, labor, and faith. And when the dust cleared, all their money didn't help them. Every one of their candidates lost. Because when labor and faith and civil rights comes together, there ain't nothing we can't do. This year, They tried to pass voter ID in North Carolina. I know they passed it other places, so they wanted it all over the South. And they brought in all the Tea Party rhetoric, all the lies, all the false arguments. They brought it in there, but they ran into our coalition. They want to vote, but we had the power to strengthen the governor who vetoed their trickery, and they couldn't override it. Labor, civil rights, faith, working together. We can bust the solid South. We've got to fight in the South and fight in the North. And you need to understand that in North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, for instance, where many of your kinfolk are, all you need is a 5% increase of the black vote and a 5 to 7% increase of the white vote that chooses to get past race and vote their interests and not their fears. And that will change the South. The senators that come from the South, the representatives that come from the South. And if you change that, then you change the opposition to labor and civil rights in the halls of power. Could you imagine North Carolina, for instance, where we have 15 electoral votes, if after this election we put 60 organizers on the ground, black, white, and brown, trained in civil rights and labor in Mississippi and in Georgia, we could in fact break open the solid South. And when you break open the solid South, you open up a new future for America. And so those of us who are your cousins and kinfolk, we want you to know from way down yonder, we ain't stopped fighting yet, and come on and join with us. But there are just a few other reasons I'm here. The second reason I'm here is that we must tell the story of labor everywhere. We got to tell it in our pulpits, tell it from our street corners, and never be ashamed to tell it. Don't let anybody talk about labor, because the propaganda machinery of the far right is constantly trying to create a kind of social amnesia among the citizens of this country. Because if you forget where you come from, there's a danger you going back. So we must raise our voices loud, all of us, activists, theologians, preachers, civil rights. When labor is attacked and labor is demonized, we must say, are you crazy? Do you know your history? If you like weekends off, you better thank labor. If you like paid vacation, you better thank labor. If you like sick leave and Social Security and minimum wage and the Civil Rights Title VII and overtime pay, you better thank labor. If you like pension funds and unemployment insurance, you better thank labor. If you like wrongful termination laws, if you like sexual harassment laws, if you like Americans with Disability Act, if you like holiday pay, if you like dental plans so you can get your teeth fixed, you better thank labor. So when you attack labor, you attack America. Oh, have mercy here. Third, the other reason I'm here, because we must be clear what this election is about and who we are supposed to be as a nation. When I read what the dream is, at least what it is on paper, the original language of our Constitution says, we the people, not I the person, not we the corporation. Help me, Lord. We the people of these united, in order to form a more perfect union, not perfect yet, establish justice. Let me say something right there, because you keep hearing all these candidates and they say America is about freedom. Well, freedom isn't even the first word in the Constitution. Justice. Justice. Because where there's no justice, there really is no. Y'all better talk to me. And then after justice, you get ensure domestic tranquility. because you can't have domestic tranquility without justice. Then you have common defense. Then you have promote the general welfare. Wait a minute. Welfare ain't a bad word. It's in the Constitution. I always like my conservative friends when they want to run down people on welfare. We understand that racialized narrative. We understand the trick you're trying to play, you know. But the problem is when they try to run welfare down around somebody like me and people like you, they got to forget that some Negroes read. If you go to the library and read, you'll find out that the first welfare wasn't given to black folk. The first welfare was given to the former plantation owners. After the Civil War, they asked for welfare to rebuild their plantation, but didn't want to give us 40 acres and a mule. Come here, talk to me. You want to talk about welfare? Come here, let me read the footnotes. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt first passed AFDC, Aid for Families with Dependent Children, it didn't go to black people or brown people, not even many poor white people. It went to certain white people. You want to talk about welfare? People who were on farms and domestic workers couldn't even get Social Security when it was first passed. It was 17 years after it was first passed before those who were domestic and in the agrarian community were able to get a welfare, get Social Security. You want to talk about welfare? What do you call 250 years of free labor if that ain't welfare? America! America was built on welfare. The question is not, do people need welfare? The question is, why? What are the systemic reasons? How is it that we have applied so much attention, violence? And we will not allow this propaganda, whoever you vote for, where you're going to call President Obama the welfare president and claim 4-point-some million additional people on the welfare roll. Well, by the time Bush got through, it was 8.1 million on the front. You didn't call him a welfare president. America is not just about freedom. Freedom alone is a daze. Freedom alone is dangerous. The question is freedom to do what? Freedom to be what? Freedom to be who? And so this election, Dr. King said, is deeply rooted. This dream is an American dream. One day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That's what this election is really about. See that? See, that one of them Negro from the South here. Wait a minute. We'll get there in a minute. We'll get there in just a second. But that's what this election is really about. What we must ask of those running for office is, what's your dream? What's your vision? Where do you want to lead us? See, we're clear. We know you want the title. You know, you wouldn't have signed the election papers and you wouldn't be raising all this money. We know you want the title. But if we give you the title, what will be your testimony? We aren't interested in your propaganda. What's your dream? What do you want for America? All of America. What's your dream of community? What's your vision rooted in? What does your budget say? Because wherever your heart is, that's where your treasure will be. I believe, and many others, that there are 5 areas that we ought to be asking every candidate for president, governor, and on down. Where do you stand on economic sustainability, addressing poverty, good jobs, living wage employment, and protecting labor rights? What's your dream? Where do you stand when it comes to public education for every child? What's your dream? Where do you stand for health care for all and ensuring Medicare and Medicaid? What's your dream? Where do you stand when it comes to addressing the disparities in our criminal justice system that is locking up more black and brown men than ever before in history? Where do you stand on voting rights, defending a democracy, and expanding those rights? We know you want the title. But where is your testimony? Does your vision of leadership care for everybody? Do you believe in living wages for all workers and workers' rights? Or do you believe that only the top ought to get the cash and the rest of us ought to get the boot? Do you want to blame the poor? Or do you want to lift up the poor? Do you have an economic vision that economist Otto Schwammer says removes the blind spot of consciousness and recognizes that we are all tied together? Do you want to be president or governor because you care for everybody and you have a dream for everybody? Or do you want to be president or governor so you can create a nightmare for some of us? Is your dream about us and them? Is your dream about your party and your power, your people? Is your dream myopic, only yours, or peripheral? Do you see everybody? Does your vision just look up and see those at the top on the hill and never looks down and sees those in the bottom of the valley? And since some of our ultra-conservative friends want to make it an issue, we want to know who you're married to. Yeah, we really do. Are you married to big business who can buy you? Or are you married to the people who elected you? Let's talk about marriage. Are you married to the high-paid lobbyists, or are you married to the everyday laborers? Did you perform your nuptial vows at the altar of injustice and division, or are you married to justice and unity? Yeah, we want to know who you're sleeping with. And since so many, George, make claim to faith and put their hands on the Bible when they're sworn into office, I want to know, do you know what's in the book? Do you know what God's public policy platform is? Do you know what God's vision is? I know you put your hand on the Bible, and I know you claim, and I know you think that when you come around black and poor people, all you got to do is say Jesus 2 times and nothing else should say matter. But that day is over. Do you know what's in the book? I want to have a values discussion. We need a values discussion. Those of us in the labor and progressive movement, we cannot allow the ultra-conservative to steal the moral high ground. Let's have a moral discussion. Let's challenge them with what's in the book, the Bible. The book says in Deuteronomy, if there's any poor among you, one of your brothers, in any town that the Lord has given you, don't harden your heart. Don't close your hand to the poor. Do you know what's in the book? The book says, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you come to see me? When I was in prison, did you... What's in the book? Where are your values? Don't let these ultra-conservative religious folk dictate the moral message of our time. God has a vision for working men and women, labor rights and fair wages and moral rights in the sight of God. Isaiah 58, the Bible says, cry loud and spare not. The kind of religion I want is not the religion that goes in a temple and plays pretense. If you want to please God, pay people what they deserve. That's in the book. Take care of the poor. Clothe the naked. God has deep love for working men and women. You know he does. Any of y'all know the book? I know they're playing that other music over there, but any of y'all know the book? Raise your hand. There's some church folk in here. You know God loved working people and laborers. Moses was a builder. Noah was a shipbuilder and an expert in transit. He was in that labor union. Nehemiah built walls. He was in that labor union. David worked with livestock and the meat business. He was in that labor union. One of the psalmists was a janitor because he said, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in my father's house. Ruth was a farmhand in the agricultural labor. Peter worked the fishing industry. He was in that labor union. Paul was in textile. He worked in that labor union. And Luke was in medical services. So he was in the Jerusalem chapter of SEIU. Yeah, God. The moral agenda of this nation is off center if it doesn't start with how we care for the poor and how we care for working people. And so you got to understand what this election is really about. This election is about the heart. Put your hand on your chest, say the heart of the nation. Because when you read history, I don't have time to read it all, but every time the nation's heart begins to function better, there are forces that try to stop the nation from having a heart. From 1868 to 1872, the nation began to get a heart, tried to come out of slavery and segregation. And by 1872, there were those who began to push against the nation having a heart. 1954, 1968, the nation began to get a heart. 68, Dr. King is killed. 68, Richard Nixon institutes the white Southern strategy, all in an attempt to shut down the heart of the nation. And whether we'll be a nation that has a heart, that's the question of this election. America, God shed his grace on you. And the question is, will America remember that? Will its leaders remember that whatever we have is not because this nation has been so good? It's not because this nation has done so much right, but it's because God has shed his grace. But there is a responsibility when grace is on you. You can't get grace and then shut up your grace toward others. It's dangerous to mess with the heart, George. Because if you stop the heart, the whole body malfunctions. You slow down the heart, the whole body gets sick. My wife is in the medical profession, like many of you here. And when something happens to the heart, whatever else is going on, it has to cease. Fix. She tells me when she's on the ward, if somebody's heart stops, all other work stops. Because somebody's got to fix the heart. We're being called in this election to work on the heart of America. And since I'm talking to medical professionals, I want to ask you, how do you work on the heart? Well, I heard that somebody has to call a code. And when you call a code, that means everybody has to do their part. Somebody's got to go get the cot and the medicines and the defibrillator. And when the code is called, they bring a defibrillator into the room. The defibrillator has the ability to provide the necessary electric shock to bring back the heart to life. If the heart of this nation is in trouble, then the role of our votes this year is more important than ever before. If the heart is in trouble, then our votes this year must provide the necessary power to revive the heart. And I'm telling you, we got a heart problem. I see an arrhythmia about to happen. When there are those who want to take health care from the sick, our heart is in trouble. When there are those who want to take Medicare and Medicaid, our heart is in trouble. When there are those that want to take living wages and labor rights, our heart is in trouble. And so SEIU, so labor, so civil rights community, so faith community, it's time for us to call a code. We've got to tell everybody, if you ever needed to vote, you sure do need to vote now. Touch your neighbor and say, call a code. Email everybody you know. Text everybody you know. Facebook everybody you know. Knock on every door you know. Call everybody you know. I don't know how to tweet, but if you know how to tweet, tweet everybody. Because our heart is in trouble. And it's time to shock this nation. If labor votes at its full strength, we'll shock the nation. If progressive churches vote at their full strength, we'll shock the nation. Don't worry about the Tea Party and what they're drinking. Bring out your defibrillator. That's your vote. Shock the nation. Don't worry about Charles and David Koch. Money can't buy the ballot. We can shock the nation. Don't talk about the talking heads that talk about how the debate went. The debate is over. It's voting time. Somebody better shock the nation. George, I'm getting on my plane, but can I act like a Southern preacher? I come from a faith tradition that says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, we can shock the nation. I come from a tradition that says weeping may endure for a night, but if you walk by faith, joy comes in the morning. I come from a faith tradition that says one can chase 1,000, can come out of death because he died one Friday, but early Sunday morning got up from the grave. Tell your nation, say, neighbor, nobody gave us the right to vote. Too much blood, too many tears were shed. Tell your neighbor, it's time to shock the nation. Put your hands on your chest. Say, America, you will have a heart. Boop, boop, boop. I see a pulse. I see a pulse. I see a pulse.